Yes, Calvin, I heard American said the word thank you very often. So, thank you is the sign and the feeling of thankfulness. So, can you give us the definition of thankfulness?
Sure. Yes, I agree that Americans say thank you a lot. It's kind of the go-to way that we use to express thankfulness. But for me, thankfulness has a meaning similar to being content. For example, in this world we all have problems, things that we wish we had, things that we want to accomplish. But we also have a choice. I think that we can choose to be content and happy in the things that we have already, or we can choose to be disappointed in the things that we don't have. And in my opinion, we would all be much happier if we tried our best to focus on the things that we have in our lives already and choose to be thankful for those things. We can hope for things that we don't have, but focus on the things that we do have and be thankful for those things. So for me, that's the meaning of thankfulness.
Yes. Calvin, when you were a child, what did your parents teach you about saying thank you and being thankful?
That's a good question. For me, I don't remember clearly my parents teaching me those things, but for sure that they did, because I learned from a young age to say thank you when someone does something good for us. And I learned to say please if I want something, and I learned to say you're welcome if someone says thank you to me. And those are always, they're pretty common in American culture, that people, those are common words that people use to express their thankfulness. So I don't remember clearly my parents teaching me those things, or how they taught them, but they did, because I learned from a young age to do those things.
Calvin, can you share with us some important things in life which you are thankful for every day?
I'm thankful for many things in my life, but I think the thing that I'm most thankful for is my faith in God. So I believe that God sent His Son Jesus to die for me. And when I believed in Jesus, I have peace and I have forgiveness for my sins. And I feel that God has saved me from my sins. And so I think I'm thankful most for what God has done for me. I'm also very thankful for my parents. They sacrificed a lot for me and my older brother and sister. They worked very hard, and they saved all the money that they could so that they could pay for all three of us to go to college, to go to university. And they always were able to help us and give us the things that we truly needed, even if it meant that we didn't get to have all of the nice things that maybe some of our friends had. We always had what we needed, and we all got to go to university because my parents worked very hard to save for that.
For you, Kevin, why is the attitude of gratitude important in our lives?
I think the attitude of gratitude, or just a general attitude of thankfulness, is one of the most important things that we can have in our lives. If we choose to be thankful, to have an attitude of thankfulness, then I think we will be much more content in life overall. I also think that the opposite of an attitude of thankfulness would be to be disappointed in the things that we don't have, or to be jealous that someone else has something that we want. That would be the opposite of the attitude of thankfulness. So for example, let's pretend that you ask me for $1 million, and I give you $750,000. but then you say to me, oh, but I asked for $1 million. So that's not really showing respect for the gift that I did give you. So in that example, you're choosing to focus on the part that you did not receive instead of the part that you did receive of the money. You still received a lot of money, it just wasn't what you asked for. So even though that's kind of a funny example, I think that it can teach us a lot about respecting and being content in the things that God has blessed us with and the things that other people give to us.
Kevin, in English, there is a phrase about the attitude of gratitude, about what we have in life, have fun. Can you explain to us about this attitude and in what context can we use this phrase?
Yeah, that's a really common phrase, and it's actually a really good phrase to explain the idea of thankfulness. So imagine that I have a cup or a glass that has water in it. It's not full, but it's not quite empty. It's about halfway full. So there's two ways to think of it. You can think this glass is half full. That's like a person who's content. They think, oh, I still have water to drink. I have everything I need. That's a very optimistic person. It's a very thankful person. They're thankful for what they have. Or you could think of that glass as half empty. Oh, but I don't have the rest of it anymore. It's half gone. That's like a person choosing to focus on the things that they don't have anymore, or maybe the things that they don't have yet. And I think that in that example, it shows us an example of someone who is optimistic and someone who is pessimistic. That means someone who chooses to look at the things in their life that they have and they are thankful. Or pessimistic means someone who chooses to focus on the things that they don't have in life. And usually people that choose to look at the glass half empty are not as happy as people who choose to look at the glass as half full.
Kevin, when you helped a friend and then your friend expressed the appreciation and the attitude of gratitude for your help, what would you feel when you received the thankfulness from your friend?
As an American, maybe I think of this question a little bit differently. If I helped a friend or gave a friend something, I would almost expect them to say the words thank you. If they didn't, I might be a little bit offended, as if they don't respect me. And the reason for that is Americans are very free to say thank you, even if they don't really mean it. So I think Americans really focus on words to show our thankfulness. Whereas I think in other cultures, maybe actions show your thankfulness. But for example, if I help a friend and they don't say thank you, but then maybe later they do something to show their thankfulness through an action, I might not realize that that action was meant to show that they were thankful if they don't use the words thank you. So I think if they did not say thank you, I might be a little bit offended.
Yes, Kevin, if possible, we would like for you to share a real example which you have witnessed about the power of thankfulness and appreciation for the help of others.
Sure. So there's actually a story from the Bible that's a perfect example of showing thankfulness to others. In this story, Jesus is walking and he comes across 10 people who are sick. They have leprosy. And they call out to him and they say, Jesus, help us. And all Jesus says is, go and show yourself to the priest. And the 10 people with leprosy then go to show themselves to the priest, but on the way, they realize that their sickness is gone and they have been healed. And and 9 of them, they go off and they celebrate and they're happy. Only 1 of them turns back to thank God, and they go back to Jesus and they say thank you. In the story, only one of the 10 people who were healed were truly thankful. So the story teaches us that an attitude of thankfulness is really important. For example, we can very freely ask someone for help, but sometimes it's harder to remember to say thank you. It's easy to ask for help or to ask someone to borrow something, but once we have received that help, we have to remember to say thank you. Otherwise, it does not show our thankfulness.
In English, there is also an opposite attitude of helpful. That is taking for granted attitude. Can you explain to us about this attitude, and in what context can we use this phrase?
So, to take for granted has the opposite meaning of thankfulness. So, when we take someone or something for granted, it means that we become used to it. We no longer appreciate it, and we are no longer thankful for it because we have received it many times. So this would be like someone asking for help, but expecting that the person will say yes automatically. And then they take for granted that the person chose to help them. For example, maybe if I go to coffee with a friend, and we get to the coffee shop and we go to pay for our coffee, and my friend says, "Oh, I forgot my wallet." Maybe I say, "Okay, no problem, I'll buy your coffee this time." But then every time after that, my friend forgets his wallet every time, and eventually he just expects that I will pay for his coffee. This is a good example of taking for granted. It means that you are no longer thankful, and you just expect that people will help you, or that people will help you.
Yes, Kevin. So for you, when someone receives helps from people, but he or she did taking for granted, what would he or she lose in this case?
Well, if we think back to the example of the 2 friends going to coffee, and one friend always forgets his wallet, and the other friend has to pay for the coffee every time. And the friend who forgets the wallet begins to expect this. Well, eventually the friend who pays every time, they'll get tired of this, and they will stop going to coffee with this other friend. And so, for me, I think that someone who always takes for granted, they will eventually lose friendships, they will lose relationships, and I think that person will eventually become lonely because people recognize that they are not a thankful person, they're not a content person, and eventually I think that they will lose relationships.
Yes, Kevin, thank you for coming and sharing with us today. So we have the last but most important question for you today. That is, do you have any advice for Mercy friends about the attitude of thankfulness and appreciation for the helps of others to them?
Sure, I would love to share some advice for our friends watching this video. I think my advice would be that you have a choice to be thankful or disappointed. Thankful for the things that you have, or disappointed in the things that you don't have. We all have needs, but I think that instead of being disappointed in the things that we don't have, we can choose to be hopeful for those things. We can be thankful for the things we have already, and hope for the things that we don't have, instead of being disappointed that we don't have them yet. I think that is more of a thankful attitude. We can still hope for things we don't have, without being disappointed. And then people will want to be around us more because we're a positive person. I also think in American culture, we have a habit of using only words to show our thankfulness. Someone does something very nice for us and we say, thank you. And we think that's the end of it. We showed our thankfulness already. But in other cultures, even in Vietnam, I think that words are not as important in showing thankfulness. Someone in Vietnam would do something to show their thankfulness. There's an action to show their thankfulness. But for me, I think, and maybe this is just because I'm a foreigner, but for example, if I do something to help a friend and they don't say thank you, but then maybe a few days later they buy a milk tea for me and they just give it to me and they don't say anything, maybe I will not recognize that that was to show their thankfulness. Because I'm coming from a different culture, I may not realize that that was the purpose of the milk tea. So in my opinion, and the advice that I would give, is that we can show thankfulness in both ways. We can say thank you, and we can also do something to show our thankfulness. For example, in the same example, maybe I do something for a friend. Maybe they don't say thank you right away, but later they go and they buy me a milk tea, and they bring it to me, and they say, this is to show my thankfulness for what you did for me, or this I wanted to say thank you, so here's a milk tea for you. So I think action and words are a great way to show that we're thankful.
Yes, and thank you again for coming and sharing with us a very, very meaningful and useful message today. Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.